Today, I had the pleasure of talking to Nyx Horror co-founders, Moshaty, Melody Cooper, Lisa Kröger, and Kelly Krause. We talked at great length about the origin of the Nyx Film Festival and what they're doing as horror co-founders to celebrate women in film and specifically women in horror, and the incredible micro short film fest that they founded called 13 Minutes of Horror that starts this weekend, Friday, of course, the 13th. Because you guys just started like August of 2020, right? Like, tell me a little bit about like what drew you all together, what this your whole origin story is.
Well, we were operating quietly for probably about 9 or 10 months or so before we quote unquote went public in August of last year. And the way that came about is in October 2019. I had started a hashtag on Twitter called #HelloWomen. And so every day of the month, I was highlighting a woman working in the horror genre. Mo, Lisa, and Melody were each, highlighted and part of that group of women. And then Melody reached out to me at the end of the month, beginning of November, saying that this was such a great thing, and can we somehow connect with each other, like all the women, can we all connect with each other and hopefully find ways to support and collaborate? And I thought that was a fantastic idea, and so that quietly developed as Nyx Horror Collective. Our name comes from the Greek goddess of the dark and the night sky. And our philosophy is that you can't know the light without first knowing the dark, and that is that is why we love Nyx so much. And Melody was the one who came up with that wonderful name. And yeah, so like I said, we were kind of meeting quietly every month, starting at the end of 2019 through early 2020, and of course COVID hit, and that kind of put a pause on everybody's respective independent projects, which were largely short films. And then, Melody reached out again and said, we should try to do something in the middle of this mess. And that kind of initiated a slew of these projects, of which 13 Minutes is one of them. And I will pass the baton to my colleagues if they want to add any more to that story.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No. So Melody, you sound like you were like very instrumental and very passionate about this. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, well, I was doing my own kind of highlighting of women in horror on Twitter, and I came across what I loved about what Kelly was doing is she was highlighting people that I didn't know who were really emerging, like really up and coming. And so I just thought, I wanted to actually create content, because a lot of us are in this space where we're trying to uplift each other, but we're frustrated by not being able to see our work executed. So I thought it'd be fun to support each other in that way. And then I was working, I came out to I was in LA 2 years ago to work as a staff writer on my first show, 2 Sentence Horror Stories. And then about 2 weeks before the room closed for the second season, COVID hit, and we had to, they shut down, and we did everything remotely. So our rooms went remote. We were lucky in that we were shooting our show in Toronto, and we went forward after a little bit of a break, but everything went to a standstill. And I said, you know what? I'm on break, I'm on hiatus from this show. And again, I thought, let's create content. And we can't do it necessarily, film and TV, but we could write a podcast. So that's how we kind of came together, is this idea of like, I love old horror stories told and new ones told via the auditory and radio and podcast, and we didn't have to wait on anyone to do that. And the 4 core women who are on, who you're talking with now, were so dedicated and enthusiastic and talented. None of us had written a podcast before. We said, let's do it anyway. And that's the other thing I love, is the fearlessness of the group of women that I'm working with and have the joy to work with.
So you did this as like a narrative podcast?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. And we did it in various ways. We learned how to, co-write, either someone writes a different episodes or within, different scenes within the same episode. So it was great for us to kind of play. We had a sandbox, and we made the most of it, I think, and we learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lisa, and Mo, like, what about horror like attracts, like what is it that attracts you to that genre?
Um, how long do we actually have for this?
As long as you want.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many, there's so much about it.
Well, I really liked it. I mean, for me, it's I as a child, I really was delving into like books and TV. I was a latchkey kid. So it was where I had to really occupy myself. All my sisters and I are all 5 years apart. So I really had to occupy my own self, and no one wanted to, entertain me. So I found that, the early days of, Cinemax and HBO, when they played whatever all day long, I started learning about, horror movies and Stephen King movies. And then I started reading Stephen King books way too young, and then just kind of following suit into what was scarier. So for me, it was all a big challenge of myself to see what I could handle, because I was home a lot by myself. I was home alone, not that my mother was neglectful or anything. She was just worked 2 jobs, but I always wanted to see what I could handle. And if I knew I could handle this kind of scary stuff, then I wanted more of it. And I really became voracious about it when I was a teenager. But especially to Melody's point about content creation, and I think for all of us, we've all been writing for a long time, whether it be short form or trying to write television series, or Lisa is a very accomplished author as well. So it's nice to see people value your work, especially in this space. And it's nice to have the camaraderie of other women who are also going through those same motions and those lack of opportunities and those gatekeeping tendencies of our sometimes of our male counterparts and the industry itself. So I think for what attracts me to horror as an adult is really the challenge of our gaze as women, redefining what's already been put out there for mass consumption. We have different stories to tell. Most of our life is horrific, right? We're asked to plan on getting married very, very young. We're asked to be little brides, and we have every doll has a male counterpart. And we have childbirth horror stories, we have anxiety, we have body dysmorphia. So we have natural horrors in our life that we have to deal with. So those types of stories need to be told and need to start being ingrained in the culture as a new normal, so to speak, and really get our stuff out there. So for me, it's at this point, it's really about how can I bring my female perspective into slashers, into ghost stories, into creepy kids, into hauntings. How can we do that effectively without using the tropes that have already been put before us? So again, it's a challenge, but it's a different challenge on this point.
Yeah. And it is interesting with how, like you said, like women have a whole different perspective on life. I mean, we go through so many different things. And I look at my nieces and my own daughter, and their lives are different, even just the next generation. Before we go on, Melody, I just wanted the name of the podcast.
We just wrote the script. We're in discussions for there is interest in the script to be purchased and for someone to develop it, but it's called Lockwood. Yeah. And I want to just add one other thing, because it's one of the things that's starting to happen and I think is great is we're starting to have women. I mean, we know that my shirt says, there are women who are working in the industry, but from the television perspective, especially, there's so many opportunities. And the show I worked on was created by a woman, Vera Mao, 2-sentence horror stories. And almost every episode focuses on women and the perspective of women, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus as well. But it really is about marginalized people, and in particular has a woman's focus. And it was such a joy working in a room that was mostly women. There were 5 writers and it was 4 women. And that's for horror. So it gave me this sense that this can be done and the industry is ready for it. Or if it's not, we'll make it ready. So I think that there's some real change beginning to happen. That's exciting.
Yeah, totally. So Lisa, like you, Mo had said that you're also an author. Have you written a book?
Yeah, I have. So my book is called Monster She Wrote. And it's about like, it's a history of women writing in horror and speculative fiction. So it's, I grew, well, I'm Southern, if you can't tell from the accent. I grew up very much, a Southern girl. There are certain things that are expected from you. Be very prim and proper. I always say I was my mother's little doll. She used to dress me up in the big fleefy dresses, and, cotillion is still a thing down here. And, it was this very much like sugar and spice kind of world, but I also always have been drawn to horror. I've always loved it. One of my, and I can give you all the academic reasons why. I got my PhD in Gothic literature. So I feel like I could tell you, horror is the transgressive genre, and it pushes boundaries, and it makes you uncomfortable in a good way, and all that kind of stuff. But horror is just fun. Like, telling a good scary story is just fun. One of my earliest pictures I have of me is I got into my mother's red lipstick and colored my entire face red to make a horror story that I was telling my sister. So that she was furious, absolutely furious. And it never quite went away. And so I was always very much intrigued by it. I read as much as I could, but growing up, I read a lot of men, Edgar Allan Poe and Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft and all Peter Straub and all these great stories. But I was missing a lot of seeing myself in them. I wanted to see more women. And so I started seeking them out, and that led to me writing Monster She Wrote. And then once I wrote that, I realized that, I hit this amazing community of women, who all felt the same way. And I think that's kind of goes to what every single woman, Mo, Kelly, Melody, all of you have been talking about, is that, we all have this passion. We all have stories to tell. And it's so powerful when you see what happens when you put us together and see the stories that kind of come out, and it's very exciting. So
I also think it's interesting that you guys met on social media, like on Twitter. I'm a huge Twitter person. Like, I've been doing it since 2009, and I've met so many people. I've gotten many jobs from my connections on Twitter. And I think do you have any thoughts about, like, are there special hashtags that you guys use to find the horror community besides #horror? But, like, are there other ways to find other people in this world?
In horror, in the particular horror, I mean, there's a hashtag women in horror that will really get you to a few. But I think it's there's several hashtags and groups that we're all aware of that I think in a way just hashtagging women in horror will kind of begin to take you, so we go down the rabbit hole and just explore all these different creatives. There's actually something I came across today, because a woman who's making horror film asked me if I knew of an editor who was a woman and a woman of color, and there's something called the reframeproject.org, and it lists all these different groups, women's groups, Asian, Latino, Black, where you can find creatives behind the camera, in front of the camera, where you can, there's a cast and crew organization, and within those you can find some that are specifically by genre, but in particular where I think one of the things that interests me is that we were interested in horror. I mean, I write other things as well, but I write sci-fi as well, and thrillers. But I'm also interested in directors who are interested in exploring horror, and women writers and creatives who have never explored horror and haven't jumped in yet to see, to try their hand at it, and to see if maybe it's a genre they love watching, but they've never tried creating it. So I think it's always interesting to look, if you're looking for people to work with, to not necessarily only look in the horror community, but we should absolutely support the women who are already in it.
And I also think it's really interesting what you just said about people who haven't tried horror yet. This idea of this 60-second film, these micro shorts, it's like a great way to dip your toe in and give it a shot. Like, was that part of why you were thinking of, let's do micro shorts of 60 seconds as opposed to a 10-minute short, or, you know?
I think there are a couple of reasons why we chose that format. So firstly, just the constraints of filming anything during the time of COVID, and, you know, doing something that was basically a minute long, you know, is something that you can feasibly just shoot on your phone. Like, that's how many filmmakers we thought would probably approach it, you know, basically like a TikTok video, what you were creating. And you could use your phone to do it, you know, and you could use just yourself, you could use your roommates, your housemates, your family, you know, the people who are living under the same roof as you, in a, you know, safe, controlled environment. The other reason why we selected it was just because micro shorts are really the format that get more views than anything else as people's attention spans continue to shrink and dwindle. And, you know, so we thought, well, that was probably the best format, consequently, to get whichever filmmakers are selected out there and get them more exposure. We also selected it just for ourselves as the people who were running this festival, and this being our very first time doing anything like it. And, you know, keeping in mind the time that would be required to plan and program something like this. And if we were going through several, you know, 10-minute shorts, 20-minute shorts, if we were looking at independent features, that is far, far more time consuming than a 60-second film. It's also far more time consuming for our judges, who have the final say in the end as to, you know, who is selected and who's going to be featured. And, you know, so we wanted to be mindful of their time as well, because they are leaders in the horror industry and in the film and television industry, and they maintain very busy schedules and lives.
Yeah. What about the folklore thing? Like that, like what made you pick that, like, as a theme? Any of you?
I think all of us firstly just love folklore. But
I write a lot. I think we all write things, and we've all written something that encompasses folklore. And it's just, so when you think about folklore, not just your traditional folklore, but it really exists all over the country, all over the world, through different cultures. And so it seems so accessible for that reason. But somebody else also.
Oh, those were the first horror stories, really. You know, they were certainly the first ones I was exposed to, you know, because it's kind of like folklore and urban legends, and you hear about the thing in the woods outside of the house, you know, or why nobody goes into that house in particular. Those are the fun stories to tell. So it seemed like an absolute brilliant place to start with our first film fest.
I live where I grew up, and when I walk the dog every night, I have to go past this big Victorian house, and I still am scared every time I go past it, because when we were little kids, we used to say, "Oh, that's haunted," you know, it stays with you, like it totally does. But horror is so fun. Like, I mean, have you also thought about, like, first of all, like, what, before I get ahead of myself, what, and we're still on the 60-second micro short thing, is there something that, once you came with this idea and these films started coming in, was there anything that kind of surprised you about what you were receiving as submissions?
Yes.
What was that like? What were some of the fun tales?
It's interesting because we kind of have two ends of the spectrum, if you will. So one end of the spectrum, we got tons of different stories around folklores that aren't typically presented or showcased in our media, which was really exciting, that we were getting stories from different cultures that, you know, traditionally have not had any sort of space in, you know, the horror industry. I mean, even the broader film industry, to be honest. And then on the one end, you know, there were certain legends that we were getting lots of submissions around that were very popular, obviously. And so it was weird. It was very intriguing to kind of see that juxtaposition, you know, of stories that many people probably weren't very familiar with, possibly had never heard of, and then ones that everybody was familiar with.
You think like in the judging process, the ones that were super familiar, it worked against them? Or were they also so different? Like it was a familiar tale, but like there were like 20 and they all took a different angle.
I don't think we didn't have that many that were on the same, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was mainly that the judges were really looking for the, regardless the work, how unique the voice was and how well executed. And for me, the surprise was the animation. I didn't expect
Mm.
get something along those lines, and how stunning that can be for horror. We often don't think of that medium for horror, and it's used quite a bit, but in some cultures, and we're beginning to see more of it. But that really surprised me. And I also I just I'd seen very short horror films that worked. It's amazing how much story you can tell, and how much impact, even emotionally, you can have, how terrifying it can be in just 1 minute. It's amazing. So I thought they did a great job.
Yeah. I mean, it is pretty incredible in 1 minute. And I mean, did you feel like giving a theme to it made it almost more, not, I don't want to use the word easier, but just, just maybe more that a filmmaker could wrap their brain around, okay, I have to do a folklore thing in just 60 seconds, as opposed to making it broad. Like we want a horror submission, a 60-second horror submission.
Yeah. I think it's, I always like rails. I don't know about anybody else, but I like when someone gives me constraints, I can be more creative.
Because it's almost like if you have too many choices,
I think that was kind of the secondary challenge, right? It wasn't just 60 seconds of making a horror film. It was like, also it has to be folklore themed. So I think we were not only asking people to kind of stretch their imaginations and really create, because we do have some that, like to Kelly's point, of two ends of the spectrum in technicality as well, which is great, that are all 13 really run the gamut of, this is on somebody's phone, this is with $5,000 equipment. They're all scary. They're all folklore. But I think that secondary layer of it was really for us to really ask people to push themselves further. I mean, we're always trying to strive to do the next thing and differentiate ourselves. Like, how can you do that in 60 seconds?
Have you guys thought about, like, I know you guys are very organized. Have you thought already, like, for next time, like, or maybe even branching out into different genres? Like, what is your theme for next year, and how often will you do these? Every year, every quarter? Like, since they, like, what have you thought about?
We have a theme, but I don't think are we announcing it yet?
No, you don't have to announce.
Yes, but we do. We have thought of it. We have thought of it.
Yes. Okay, good. But will you ever do like a minute of comedy, a minute of drama, or is this, you're going to stay in this horror lane?
This is we're playing in the horror sandbox.
Yeah, which is great. One of the things I was imagining too, which I thought could be really fun, is if you did this for children, like had children submit. That
is actually an idea that I had. What was it, last week? I was away with my son for his birthday, and I said it takes work to launch all these different aspects, but I actually wanted to launch a teen version where because a lot of high school kids are very accomplished and they're out there wanting to break in and work. So I think it would be great for middle school teens. I've actually led some film programs for teen girls actually, and they tell amazing stories. And I would love to make it this available for the kind of stories that teenage girls, the things that they're grappling with. We don't even know all of the things that younger women and girls are dealing with. We have some idea, but when you hear it from them directly and they have a chance to express it creatively, it's really profound. So I would love to give them a chance to play, and 60 seconds would actually even TikTok is shorter, so it would be 30 seconds, right? If you could even do that.
Yeah, I actually haven't shared this with the group yet, but I would love us to consider a program specifically for women over 40 who are transitioning into the film space and into the horror space. just because there are so few programs available to women over 40 in the film industry. The only one that I can think of is Meryl Streep's Writers Lab, and that's it. And you know, over the past couple of weeks, I've actually seen a few women on social media, you know, asking about other programs, and it's crickets. Nobody knows of anything else. I certainly don't know of anything else. Like, that's the only program, and it certainly isn't horror specific. And honestly, it's probably anybody who with a horror project is probably going to have an uphill battle to get highlighted and picked for that program. And so I would love us to develop a program for women over 40 in the horror space.
As a woman over 40, I think that's a great idea.
And I was thinking that because I actually did the Writers Lab, that Meryl Streep Writers Lab, and there aren't. Kelly's right. There aren't a lot of them. There are more of them, and you know, I just finished the Sundance Episodic Lab, and I can tell you that they are a lot of the. And I also did the HBO Fellowship, and a lot of them are making a point of opening, because of what Kelly said, opening up the world to women, especially because we haven't had the chance to work in the industry, a lot of us, until now, to be recognized. Until now, we're entry level. We're, you know, we're not starting out right out of college entry level. We're starting out in late 30s, 40s, and 50s entry level, and wonderful talent is in that age group. That experience is what a writer's room wants, for instance. So I highly second that, Kelly. I think it's a fabulous idea.
Well, and I think it's important to, you know, full disclosure that the four of us will all soon be in our 40s. So I will turn 40 at the end of the year, and you know, Lisa, Mo, and Melody are already in their 40s. And I am somebody who did transition careers. So I just had my 4-year anniversary in June for screenwriting. So I'm still fairly green to this, but this is not what I set out to do originally. I worked in archaeology for 13 plus years, and fell into this very organically. And you know, I think creating a resource for other women who are also transitioning, and again, especially older women, I think is a very important, you know, thing that we can offer.
I think a lot of us do this as a second career of our lives. Like, actually, you're the third archaeologist I have met who is archaeologist turned screenwriter, and which I think is a really interesting thing. Like, there has to be something about discovery and unearthing things and all of that that correlates to writing. And
well,
like,
archaeologists are storytellers. Sorry to interrupt
no,
you, but that is our job. Our job is to piece together a narrative of the past. Right? That is our job. And we hopefully do it in an engaging way, though you know, sadly, I feel that very often we don't, just because you know, archaeology is very much caught up in the white tower of academia. And so trying to present that material in an engaging way is something that particular industry is still struggling with and working very hard on. And it is changing, but it's changing at a snail's pace. And so to me, it does make perfect sense for an archaeologist to, you know, transition into screenwriting, whether they intended to or not. Again, like I had no intention originally. It just happened so organically, and I ended up falling in love with it. So
yeah, same with me. I went to Cornell Hotel School. I ran a hotel and restaurant for 15 years. This was like I didn't start writing until I was 40. After I got my kids off to school, and then I was like, I'm a stay-at-home mom with no kids at home. And I'm like, what do I want to do with my life? Oh, I always wanted to write a novel. And I started writing a novel, and then got pulled into writing a screenplay with a friend of mine from college, you know. So it's that whole thing that you can reinvent yourself all the time. And I think in speaking to that, it's the people who haven't tried horror before. Like, I've never written horror before, but then I started writing a horror script with a writing partner, and I was like, this is awesome. It's like a whole other kind. And that's what I love about the 60-second micro shorts. It's like, give it a try. Like, what you don't have, it doesn't cost you millions of dollars to like make a 60-second thing on your phone. Like, just try it. I'm all for people trying different genres, different mediums, and those micro shorts I think are genius.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is it's for us and for the audience to have a different perspective that brought to horror. If more and different cultures and different kinds of people are storytelling through horror, I think that just broadens it and makes it much more interesting too.
Yeah. So you've got this festival. Tell me about the 13 Minutes of Horror Festival so we can get people to tune in to watch that, because it's free, right?
Free. Well, it's on,
Free,
well,
kind of.
The actual film program of the 13 films will be launched on Friday, August 13th on the Shudder channel.
Mm-hmm.
And it will run for a month until September 13th. So so you will have to have Shudder channel to be able to see those 13 films. And then we have a program of panels and interviews that are really exciting. We have an amazing group of people that we're talking to, but I'll shift that over to the team to talk about.
Who wants to talk to me about the program? Because I'd love to know about all of that, and where people can find it and participate and listen in.
Yeah. Well, so it's really easy to find us. We're at 13minutesofhorror.com. So you can find out information about registration there. It is completely free to register. We're going to be holding all of our events this weekend, which kicks off Friday, August 13th, and goes through Sunday, August 15th. And we have all sorts of fun online things planned. So Friday night, I know in particular, we are doing kind of our kickoff. We're doing a happy hour so we can kind of get to know some of the people. Again, the idea is connecting women and these people creating. So we're going to be doing that. That's going to be fun. We're going to have a conversation with Mishna Wolf, who was the writer on Werewolves Within, which blew me away. I loved that movie. So we're going to be talking to her, and then we're actually doing a watch along party on Friday night so that everybody can watch the movie and we can all talk about it. It's going to be fun. And then we have events through Saturday and Sunday, but I'll let one of the other women tackle that.
Yeah, Mo, you want to tell me about the Saturday and the other events?
Yes, I'm trying to pull up my schedule because I'm so discombobulated with everything that's going on. So I believe Saturday we're going to be talking to a slew of our production houses. So we're going to be speaking with, I believe we'll be speaking with Jasmine Peck Bailey from Monkey Paw. We'll be speaking with the Blood Oath team, which is really looking to curate more horror content and really ease the pain, quote unquote, of developing horror and indie horror. And we're going to be talking to Fangoria as well. Am I leaving anybody out on Saturday? I'm leaving somebody out because I can't think of the schedule right now.
I think Fangoria and Blood Oath are actually on Sunday.
See,
yeah,
somebody else do it because I can't think of what's going on.
Jasmine Peck is definitely Saturday. We have our producing and financing panel on Saturday with Aaron B. Kuntz, Blood Oath, and Paper Street Pictures, and Terry Samundra, who's one of our fabulous Nyx members and who just had her feature debut on Netflix this past year, which was a horror centered around Indian lore. And then we also have Tara L. Craig of Squid Farm Productions, who's also one of our partners, and she recently put out the Shudder original film, Shook.
You guys have quite the network of impressive names in here. Like I think this is going to be fantastic. I hope a lot of people tune into it. They should.
I also just want, I think it's important to stress that out of all of our panelists, and we have a lot of great panelists lined up, only 2 are men. We only have 2 men for the entire weekend. Everybody else is a woman. And so we're very excited about that, we have so many amazing, talented women on board that we can highlight and celebrate and hopefully put an end to that awful, awful myth that there are no women in horror, because you're going to see a lot of them throughout.
That's great. That's great. So like, what are your hopes for the future of this, and not just this, but like also your the 13 filmmakers who were selected for this? Like, what are your hopes? If you could like pull a unicorn out and like put like what your dream is of what you would like to see that happen to Nyx and also for these filmmakers.
Oh my God, the filmmakers to get to have someone interested in their projects, because most of them have other projects and larger projects that the 1 minute film is either taken from or is really representative of their work. So if they don't have representation, because that's the gateway to getting more work and to be introduced to those who can support your work, that they find representation through this, and that they develop an audience that's interested in seeing more from them, because that's sometimes half the battle too. You can develop an incredible social media following. And the last few things that I've had interviews for, they really are interested in what your social media following is. That's a thing. So just in general, just to have them have the chance and the resources to create more work, that for me, that's and then I have to say, and Kelly and Lisa and Mo can talk to this as well. I received several emails, and we've all received messages from the artists who have been chosen, that just being chosen for this, it's, for some of them, it's their first laurels, first film festival, that is an incredible encouragement to go on and keep creating. And it moves me. That alone moves me. And I'm so happy that we're able to provide that. And then anything else that comes from that moves their careers forward and has them taken seriously. And whether they get staffed on a show or their own film gets financed is, to me, a wonderful thing.
I agree. So what about but Nyx in general, like, what are you hoping, like, do you think you'll be able to do this in person after COVID, like actually rent a venue and all of that? Is that a goal that you would like, or maybe a hybrid kind of thing of online and in person to reach a bigger audience?
You're hired.
This is what Matt likes about me too. I'm the idea person. He's a very big idea person too, but
we've had some preliminary discussions around that, but nothing's really been decided. I think we would love to do something hybrid, in part just because the virtual event is just so much more accessible to people. And so I think, keeping it virtual to some degree is still going to be important moving forward as far as accessibility. But something that we have considered and are still considering, since it is, a quote unquote smaller festival in the sense where, there are only 60 seconds, is, maybe sort of doing live pop-up events from city to city around it where these films can be featured. But it's early days.
One of the things I love too about virtual event is that it makes it affordable for a lot of people. They don't have to get the plane ticket, so it broadens the number of people and the variety of people who can attend. I think that's really great.
And also I'll add, because I'm a mom and so Mo and Lisa, if you're a mom with kids, you can't necessarily get away to get to an in-person event. So this, you can get your kids to sleep or put them out, get a babysitter, put them outside to play. You can be engaged in events from when it's online. And I think it democratizes it. So, yeah.
And I also love that I'm sorry. No,
I'm sorry.
Fine. I just also love that you're doing these films for a whole month. Like, people really have that long period of time to watch them. But what were you going to say, Mo?
I was just saying the accessibility was one of the cornerstones of when we started planning how we were going to take submissions in and what we were going to charge. And all of us are screenwriters, and all of us have entered contests and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars entering contests. And we didn't want to discourage somebody from trying. And a lot of our filmmakers that we know, and especially that have gotten really high on our part of our 13 are, they're indie filmmakers. They don't have, hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment. They don't have access to funding. They don't know how to self-fund their films. Some were on phones. So for us, we're not going to have a submission fee. That has been a turnoff for me. Just even entering screenwriting contests, when you look and you're excited, you're like, oh, I could really do this. Oh, it's $90 to enter, also $160 if I want somebody to tell me how much they didn't like it. So so that we didn't want to be those people. We wanted people to say, this is free to enter, put your films out. They're gonna be looked at by our prestigious judges panel. And even viewing our festival, like it's a free festival. I mean, we have a donate button. It's do whatever you can. We don't expect you to do that, but it is a free festival because there are people who are sticking their toes into horror, that are thinking of writing a horror screenplay, that want to see what other women can do and what we've accomplished. And we want to keep that inspiration going for other people and say, oh, there is a contest I can enter that I'm not going to break the bank. You know, I'm not going to not pay a bill till I can enter a contest. Because we've all done that, you know, it's the struggling artist standpoint, but that piece of accessibility with not only having the virtual piece, but also the no and low cost piece to being able to attend the festival and enter the festival was a big part. It was a big driving force of us to try to stay as accessible as possible as well.
Well, I think this is fantastic. And I think you're going to get a lot of attendance and everyone's going to love it. And I can't wait to hear more about it, and keep us posted about what you're going to do when you can announce what this theme is going to be for the next one. Don't tweet me. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
This has been great, Jean. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is
We can cut.